Everyone stopped breathing the moment a small boy walked into a canine auction. Alone. In his hand was a faded photograph of his father, an officer who never came home. In his pocket was a sealed letter, written the night before he died. People came to buy a dog. The boy came to bring his family back together. When the cage opened, the German Shepherd didn't run to freedom. He ran to the boy who once slept beside him on the night of the funeral. What happened next silenced the entire room. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof. The auction hall smelled of wet wood, old concrete, and the warm breath of restless dogs. Fluorescent lights hummed like distant bees, casting a pale glow over the rows of kennels. Evan Miller stood just inside the entrance, small beneath the height of men in heavy coats. He was 10 years old, light-skinned, thin for his age, with short brown hair. His faded denim jacket hung loose on his shoulders, sleeves frayed at the cuffs. In one hand, he held a worn photograph, a tall police officer kneeling beside a German Shepherd. The man's smile lived only on paper now. Evan's voice carried a memory of that smile, though he hadn't spoken all morning. His eyes were quiet, the kind that had learned pain too early. In his jacket pocket, he kept a sealed letter, his father's handwriting on a folded envelope. He had carried it for a year. He was afraid of what it might say, and more afraid of what it would mean once the words were real. He walked forward between kennels, shoes whispering on the damp concrete. The dogs watched him with restless eyes. Some barked once, then settled, sensing something fragile in his silence. Evan did not look at the people around him. Their voices rose and fell like an uncertain tide. "What is a child doing here?" they whispered, though not loud enough to reach him. His breath was slow, steady. He counted his steps, small numbers anchoring him to a purpose he did not fully understand, only felt. Halfway down the row, Evan stopped. In the last kennel, a 6-year-old German Shepherd stood tall and alert, coat thick with tan and dark markings. His name was Ranger, trained by the K-9 unit, once partnered with Officer Daniel Miller. Ranger lifted his head, his ears twitched forward. In his deep brown eyes, something sparked, memory perhaps, or a story that could not be told in words. Evan pressed his palm to the cold steel bars. Ranger leaned forward, placing his nose against that small, trembling hand. A soft whine rose from the dog's throat. Evan hadn't heard that sound since the funeral, 3 days when Ranger refused food, lying at the foot of the flag-draped casket, watching a world collapse. Evan closed his eyes. The light around him faded into a quiet that belonged only to the two of them. He thought of the letter in his pocket, of a birthday that never came, of mornings when his father's voice filled the house like warm sunlight. He thought of Ranger's steady breathing at night, a guardian who needed no words to protect him from the dark. Tears formed, but did not fall. He had learned to hide them, the way a boy tries to be a man before he is ready. A handler nearby paused, looking at the child and the dog. The hall fell strangely still, like something sacred had entered the room without permission. Evan spoke in a whisper, barely shaping the sound with his lips. "I'll take you home." His voice did not tremble. The promise lived in him like a flame sheltered from the wind. He stayed there, palm against steel, feeling Ranger's warm breath through the cold metal. The world continued behind him, voices, footsteps, the distant call of the auctioneer beginning the morning sales. But Evan did not move. For the first time since his father's death, he felt something that resembled hope. The hall was bright with cold light. Dust hung in the air like pale snow. A wooden gavel rested on a heavy desk, waiting for a sound that would change someone's life. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper on the roof. Ranger was led to the center of the room. A 6-year-old German Shepherd, tall for his breed, coat marked with dark saddle and tan along his legs. His muscles moved with quiet power, yet his eyes were not fierce. They searched. The handler who held his leash was a broad man in his 50s, gray hair beneath a baseball cap, denim jacket worn thin at the elbows. His voice was low when he introduced the dog, like someone used to speaking to anxious animals. Lot 42, working dog, retired K9. The number hung like a label on something that should never be labeled. People shifted in their chairs. Some lifted paddles with easy confidence. Ranger stood, ears forward, body still, only his breath stirring the air. Somewhere in him, memory waited like a closed door. Evan sat near the back. The chair dwarfed his small frame. His faded denim jacket carried the warmth of a man who would never wear it again. His pockets were heavy with coins scraped from a piggy bank broken the night before. He had counted every dollar beneath the dim kitchen light. He was 10 years old, but his eyes were older. When the auctioneer called the first bid, $5,000, Evan's pulse stumbled. The room seemed full of adults who lived in a world he had only seen from behind a window. Victor Hale raised his paddle, a tall man in his early 40s, light skin, dark hair cut neat, a short beard trimmed like a habit of control, dressed in a simple black suit without a tie. His expression was calm, as though money was not a weight to him. He did not look at Evan. He looked at the dog the way some men look at trophies. 6, he said, his voice steady, almost bored. The numbers climbed like a ladder Evan could not reach. Evan stood. The coins in his pocket clicked like small bells. 7,200, he said, his voice breaking the hush. Heads turned. A child had walked into a room made for men with broad wallets and quiet power. Evan's cheeks flushed, but he did not sit down. His eyes were on Ranger. The dog shifted when he heard the voice. He turned his head, breath rising quick in his chest. The leash pulled gently at his neck, but his gaze did not leave the boy. Victor lifted his paddle again. No hesitation, no struggle in him. 7-5, he called. The auctioneer nodded. People murmured. Evan swallowed. The numbers felt like stones in his stomach. Yet something held him upright. Something from the year before, from the funeral where Ranger refused food and lay beside the coffin draped in a flag that smelled of cedar and rain. Evan placed his hand over his chest where the letter rested. He did not open it. Not yet. His voice was barely a breath. He's not a number. No one answered, but Ranger's ears lifted. The rain outside stopped altogether, leaving the hall in a silence that felt like waiting. A hush rested over the hall. The lights hummed above, sharp and white against the quiet. Outside, the rain slowed to nothing, leaving only the echo of it in memory. Wood, metal, breath, everything seemed to wait. The price had reached 8,000. Evan felt the number like a wall too high to climb. His feet were small in their worn sneakers, planted on cold concrete. His denim jacket, once his father's, held the faint scent of cedar and the years it had known. A man in a dark suit, Victor Hale, stood near the front. Early 40s, light skin, neat black hair, a trimmed beard close to the jaw. His posture was still, hands calm. Money did not tremble him. Yet there was a crease at the corner of his eye. Something quiet, like the trace of an old uncertainty. He looked at Ranger as if seeing value, not history. The auctioneer, an older man with a lined face, settled his fingers around the gavel. "Sold at," he began, voice steady from decades of rules. Then Ranger cried out. Not a bark, something deeper. A sound pulled from bone and memory. He lunged against the leash, muscles tensing like rope drawn tight, eyes fixed on the boy at the back. The handler struggled to hold him, a heavy man in his 50s, gray hair under a faded cap, denim jacket faded at the seams. The dog's paws scraped the floor. Chairs creaked. Breath caught. That single cry carried a year of waiting by a coffin, 3 days without food, and all the hours when he pressed his nose to a door that would never open again. The room froze. Even Victor's hand halted before lowering his paddle. Evan's heart thudded once, heavy. Something in him opened like the first crack of dawn. He reached into his jacket. Fingers trembling, he found the envelope. He had feared it for months, the weight of his father's last words. Now the fear felt different, like a bridge instead of a wound. He tore it open. Paper rasped in the silence. His voice was thin at first, but steady as he read. "If anything happens to me, take care of Ranger. He will protect you the way I protected my brothers. Ranger is part of our family." No one spoke. Even the auctioneer's hand lowered, gavel resting in stillness. Victor breathed out, slow. Something moved behind his eyes, not defeat, but recognition. The boy stood straighter. "Ranger is not Lot 42, Evan said, each word small but full. "He's the part of my father I can still hold." His voice did not carry force. It carried truth. A woman's voice rose from the side of the hall, calm, low, worn by years of duty. "I'll cover the rest." She stepped forward. Sergeant Olivia Brooks, 37, light skin, brown hair tied back, broad shoulders beneath a Navy police jacket that had seen rain, mud, and night shifts that never seemed to end. Her eyes held that tired strength found only in those who have lost and still show up. "Daniel died saving my life," she said, "and Ranger took the bullet before it reached him." The word settled like a stone placed gently on a grave. "This dog belongs with his family." The applause began slowly, like rain returning after a long drought. The auctioneer nodded, voice softened. "Ranger is awarded to the boy." Evan did not smile, not yet. Instead, he turned toward Ranger, breath quiet. And in the silence between them, he felt something like his father's hand on his shoulder. The air in the hall was still, as if the room itself had taken one long breath and chose to hold it. Light fell through high windows in thin, gentle lines, touching steel rails and polished floor. Dust drifted slowly, like tiny ghosts of time. Someone opened the kennel door. Ranger stepped free of the leash. 6 years of training held his body steady for one heartbeat. Then he ran. His stride was low and powerful, coat rippling in bands of tan and black. Evan dropped to his knees. His denim jacket folded around his small shoulders, sleeves damp from tears he no longer tried to hide. Ranger pressed into him, nose against the boy's cheek, head tucked into the hollow of his neck, just like the photograph. It was an old position they had known without understanding it. Evan's arms circled the dog's thick neck, fingers trembling in the fur. He breathed against Ranger's coat, as if the heat there might carry him back to a world where his father still walked through the front door each evening. For a moment, nothing moved. Only the soft rhythm of their breaths, braided together, made time exist. Near the edge of the crowd, Victor Hale watched. He stood straight, a tall figure in a black suit without ornament. The trimmed beard along his jaw seemed darker under the softer light. His eyes, once cool with the calm of certainty, now held something different, like a man remembering a kindness he had forgotten to offer. He whispered to himself, the words not meant for the room. "Family isn't something you buy." In his hand, he held a plain white envelope. Inside it, a check folded, without signature. He walked to the auction office and left it there, his steps quiet, like a man leaving a church. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he turned and slipped through the doors, rainlight touching his coat as he vanished into the afternoon. No applause followed him. It was better that way. Sergeant Olivia Brooks approached the boy. 37, light skin, brown hair tied behind her head in a rough knot, her posture marked by discipline and the gentle fatigue of years served. The Navy police jacket she wore had weathered nights of cold streets and long calls. Her voice was low when she spoke, steady, shaped by loss, warmed by care. She placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, her fingers firm but kind. "Your father would be proud of you," she said, "and so would Ranger." Evan looked up at her, eyes swollen from crying. In that gaze, she saw Daniel again, not in features, but in the quiet steadiness of love. She had lived with the memory of a bullet meant for her. Now she found a way to honor the cost. Every weekend after that day, Olivia came to the small house where Evan lived. She brought hot coffee for herself, cocoa for him, and the old command words Daniel had spoken in the field. Evan repeated them with a boy's soft voice and a man's earnest heart. Ranger listened, tail slow, ears high. In the yard, under the shade of a maple tree, the three stood like pieces of a family assembled from grief and loyalty. One afternoon, Evan and Ranger walked home from the auction hall for the first time. At the door, the dog paused. On the wall hung the framed photograph of Daniel in uniform. Ranger stepped closer, nose brushing the glass, a soft whine deep in his chest. Evan rested his hand on the dog's back, warmth steady beneath his palm. "We're home," the boy said. In every quiet reunion, there is a truth we easily forget. Love outlasts loss. For many of us growing older, the house becomes quiet, the body grows tired, and the days feel longer than they used to. Illness visits, aches stay, and memories of those we loved return like shadows at dusk. But like Evan and Ranger, we can still find family, in loyalty, in faith, in kindness shared. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment, subscribe, and may God bless you with peace, comfort, and strength in every tomorrow.